Hello everyone, this is Mandy Kruger. I am the acting coordinator for National History Day in Wisconsin. I'm going to be walking through our exhibit webinar for today, and I'm just going to be explaining a couple things you guys should expect, some rules, and things you should also know about the state event in doing an exhibit. So with that, exhibit webinar for today, and I'm just going to be explaining a couple things you guys should expect. So the agenda, we have some must-dos and rules for exhibits. We'll start with that. Then I have some suggestions on organization, research, and theme. Those are some simple things that all students can do before the state event. You know, exhibits are lucky enough to not be due until the day of event, so you have some time still left to work on a couple more things. Then we're going to talk through some resources, and then I'm going to leave some time for questions. Questions won't be saved, as many of you will know. I will edit those out at the end, and so if you ask any questions in the group chat, I will answer those as we go or leave time at the end, and then they will be edited out before I make this video public on our YouTube channel. So no worries, student privacy will be good. One of the first things I just want to cover for exhibits is just knowing rules for the category. Some rule that we've always seen at different regionals is how deeply do you put the theme in your project. So it is a rule in the National History Day rulebook that your entry must clearly relate to the annual theme and explain your topic significant in history. It's actually in our not only the rule book, it's also in the judges' evaluation sheets. So we really do push this, and do please think about this. Get that annual theme into your project several different points and explain the topic's significance in history. So how did your topic change today? How did it depart from what history was before? So that in history part is really important to us. So including the theme in your thesis is very good point to start with, and make sure you include that theme throughout the project. Don't just include the theme words in your thesis and drop it off the map. I want to make sure you follow up with a conclusion, even in an exhibit. It's not like a paper where it has that nice conclusion area. I would highly suggest putting that in there. And then always hit the topic significance. Setup and equipment. Many of you may know exhibits must be set up by the student. You may not have a parent or teacher or anyone else do this for you. It must be done by a student. You're also in charge of supplying equipment. The only thing that we'll supply for you guys here is electricity at State. And then you've already indicated if you need electricity, and we'll be getting that for you anyway. So please come with everything you need. We will not be expecting students to come ask us for process papers and bibliographies. Don't ask your teacher for that. That is student responsibility. That is for you to do. I know. Responsibility. You guys can do this. Another reminder, unfortunately, students in the exhibit category are not allowed to wear costumes. We just want to hit on that. And then if your exhibit includes any dioramas or anything like that, make sure that any of that list, interesting things of weapons, firearms, animals, and organisms, plants, etc., do not include that. Make sure that all your props are clearly props. It's not usually an issue for exhibits, but from time to time it comes up. Some good things to know for the paperwork. Make sure you still include that title page, process paper, and there's only one process paper per project. So if you're doing a group project, I highly suggest that all of you use the words we, us. So, and maybe in your schools, you guys all wrote your separate own process papers. Make sure you combine them for the final one that's coming to State. The annotated bibliography is required and suggested by the state office. Bring 3 copies of these materials. We're going to ask you guys to bring more than that. Many judges want their own copy, and you can be seen by up to 5 judges. So I would say bring at least 5 copies in case someone else, loses one, it drops in a puddle. Just make sure you have lots of copies of this, because we will not be able to print for you at the state event. All right, so this title page, the only thing I really want to stress is make sure it's bland. I just want that title, that name, division, what you're doing. And then you need the word count for your exhibit on there and your word count for the process paper. We do really look at the word counts for the exhibit and process paper at State. We do enforce the rules, so make sure you cite it. It'll just make your life easier for now. Also, please don't include any information about who your teacher is, no school. Don't put any images on it. For annotated bibliography, luckily enough, this is not included in your word count, which is great. It includes sources for all visual, audio, and materials in your interviews. So make sure you clearly divide them between primary and secondary. It makes it a lot easier for us. So those primary sources, as you may know, are anything of the time or those who are alive during the time. Secondary sources, many of you might have interviewed a historian, you might have picked up a history book afterwards, so make sure you divide your primary from secondary sources. For size requirements, make sure you stay within any of these dimensions. They're cited in the rule book. I'm not going to go over all of them. We will be measuring, of course, but it's not as big of an issue as word count. So if I'm going to stress anything, it's within that. Media, if you choose to do media, it must be incorporated into your project, and understand that it will be left in a room and we will not be watching it for you. Although there is the public viewing time, please make sure you're in charge of it, but also that judges and viewers are able to control the media devices, especially for final rounds. You won't be in that room with your devices. So make sure it stays within the size limits and that it also runs separately. It doesn't need to be started and shut down by you. Here are a couple tips for word count. As many of you will see, I will put a bunch of links down in the description, and this will be one of them. We have a great resource that I send to all students. It's for websites and for exhibits. There is a mandatory credit. The rulebook explains it quite nicely here. It's Alice Paul, 1918, Library of Congress. If you put anything in addition to that, that becomes a caption. That's doing analysis. It's doing things extra. So that counts towards your words. This is a big issue for websites and exhibits because you guys have a pretty low word count. So go through your exhibit again. This is going to be a suggestion by me, and make sure that you have credits. Credits are mandatory, but anything in addition will be counted as a caption, and that goes towards your word count. So we also have a couple other things such as dates, quotations. They're all explained in the rule book. I've taken a screenshot here, so dates counts as one word, but if you incorporate direct quotations into your exhibit, those don't count. I want to stress for you guys as well that please do put quotations. Tell me who said it, when, where, and make sure it's very clear. I will give a suggestion later in the organization page that you should draw it out. Make sure that I know it's a quotation. 7 years ago, I know, of course, that's Abraham Lincoln, but make sure you put the quotes around it. Otherwise, it can be counted towards your words. All right, some suggestions from me include that theme again. So I want to just make sure you guys aren't losing it in your project. Include it in your conclusion, and don't let that theme to stop you from being critical. That's something we've seen at all the regionals thus far, is a lot of students aren't getting into the critical aspects of this. And so taking a stand in history can be good and bad. Do they take a stand that's far enough? Really get into that. I have some words later that I want to point out. It shows that balance. If you look at the evaluation sheets, which I will also put down in the description below, it has exactly what the judges will be looking for in your project. And one of the things is balanced research. So maybe showing two sides of an argument. Taking a stand in history, a lot of us will pick topics that we love. And that has been kind of an issue this year, as students are not getting as critical as we would like. So judges may be looking for this, using the theme and maybe talking about it a little further. All right, organization. Some of the things we love seeing in exhibits is a lot of them will do it thematically or chronologically, and then a lot of them will have headers, will help your judges read through and other readers, what begins, ends, and moving it in an organized fashion. Sometimes you have some supporting materials referenced. If you put MLK's speech on your exhibit, I'd often suggest drawing it out in a certain way different than your own writing. So either putting it in a different color, making it visually different, maybe different font, but making it visually different than the words that you wrote. Making sure quotes are identifiable, that you always cite them as well. In images, make sure you include those image credits. So a lot of you might think of, if you have a trifold, this is the kind of system that we'd use to explain to students. So in background, you're talking about things not related to your topic yet. So if I was talking about Rosa Parks, in my background, I would first talk about slavery, Jim Crow laws, things that build up to Rosa. Then we get into kind of the rising action. That's when we introduce the person in the event, because Rosa Parks doesn't make sense without talking about slavery and Jim Crow. Then we get into the main event. And so if my project was on Rosa Parks, I might do my main event about her taking the seat. And so my thesis, I would want to make that clear, either making it bigger in font size, making it very distinct from the rest of my project, because that is something judges will look for very clearly, is where is the thesis in this project? I don't want to be looking around everywhere for that. Make it in direct eyesight is my suggestion. And then talking about the main event, your main part of your argument, make it clear as well. Then if we were to keep going on this basic trifold, it's kind of that short-term impact. I always love seeing these kind of words from students as well. Impact. What kind of impact is it at the time? So if we're doing Rosa Parks, it might be the bus boycotts. It might be Rosa's career, whatever kind of direction we're taking it in. The next, it would be kind of historical significance. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Kind of draw your project to kind of a conclusion. Judges will also be looking for this in that long-term historical significance in history part is how did it change today is what a lot of you will be able to draw to. And if your project, your topic doesn't really do that, that's all right. Think about, did they change laws? 10 years after your topic, what was different because of it? All right. Another easy thing that you can do between now and state is I would highly suggest having an English teacher or writing intensive person is how I'm going to say it, proofread your project. Not only just for proofreading, but word count. Where can you lose a couple words? What do you not explain as well as other parts? It's also good to have someone, separate than your history teacher to look at it, because we have judges that come from all across different types of spectrums. So you might have a really English intensive person that will be reading your exhibit, where they won't be as impressed with, short sentences and incomplete information. All right, next, there are some online grammar and spelling systems. I don't find them as useful, but there's definitely more things out there for you guys. All right, so I talked about this earlier. There's a lot of things that you can also go through. Asking an English teacher using those online systems is also looking up synonyms. If you're looking at trying to bolster, your reading, making your writing better, it doesn't mean always adding more. It means using better words instead. And so saying the word advocated versus said, you're talking about Susan B. Anthony, saying that she advocated for something is a charged word. And that definitely gets at an argument more than just saying she said. Proposing groundbreaking idea instead of, thinking of an idea, because saying anything in a little bit a different way, going back into this and really trying to edit it will be worth your time. The other thing we've talked about before is trying to get that balance. So it's in the judging sheet, so make sure you try to draw out that. You can do it visually as well. The great thing about exhibits is that you can always do stuff visually. So if you want to do two sides of an argument, if you have a court case or two different belief systems, you can kind of have them back to back and show it visually as well. But using these words will definitely help. On the other hand, despite opposition, if you guys saw our volcano example, O is always important. And that's opposition. In face of controversy, many of you might remember Charles Darwin wasn't always the most favorable man back in the day. Many of our topics aren't as favorable, they're more controversial. So making sure you draw that out with your own writing. All right. If you're over word count, again, I'm going to stress that Word document. I'll show you guys how to find it on our system as well. But our resource here will show you how to count words. I know it seems kind of odd, but it will help you guys in the long term, because the last thing you want to do is get caught at state over word count, and that's the reason you can't move on after all these months of hard work. But if you're over word count and you're trying to cut down on words right now, I would try to suggest you do two things. Does it relate to your argument? Does this information support my argument? Or does it show the significance in history? So that background and impact. If it doesn't relate to either of those things, I think you were able to cut a couple more words out there. All right, for research. Before state, I'd suggest all across categories, I'm going to suggest looking for newspaper articles. For exhibits, it's great that you guys can display it visually. Newspapers can also have words that you don't have to use then. Explaining basic facts of the time or showing, a political cartoon would be great. And luckily, Wisconsin has made those free for you and accessible online. So there's a thing called BadgerLink. I'll link it down below. You're going to be able to search through thousands and thousands of newspapers. Another good primary source is speeches, government documents, letters. There's a lot of specific museums to a lot of different topics I'm going to suggest you guys look at, as well as archives.gov. Those are all good places to get primary sources. For secondary sources, I'm also going to suggest you have a minimum of 2 books. I know a lot of you will be like, oh, that's no issue. But for more obscure topics, we definitely understand. It might be harder to find 2 books related to your topic. Maybe you find 2 books related to the background of your topic. If you have an unknown warrior of World War II, maybe you look at 2 books related to World War II in general in the area, and you're able to cite those. I'd also say that you need at least 4 or 5 academic quality journal entries. So a lot of you might be using EBSCO, Gilgroup. Ask your school librarian or public librarian how to access these. A lot of you will have more accessible than you think. The academic quality really shines through when we look at student projects. All right, so I'm going to, again, enforce that rule book. And then at wisconsinhistory.org, I'm going to show you how to get there as well. We have that word count sheet, and I'll show you guys how to get there. And then the categories. So I talked about the judges sheet, as you may have received them already back from the regional, but maybe go through, judge your own exhibit. How would you put the checks on your own exhibit? All right, so before we get to any questions, I just want to show you guys for getting to Wisconsin history. So this is the main page when you're on wisconsinhistory.org. You can scroll down or you can find National History Day. And then let's find resources for students. Wonderful. So this is the theme sheet that we really want to push on students as well. I would suggest pulling up this sheet and picking 3 or 4 things that you enjoy from this sheet. There's the full one. I would say 80 pages is a little excessive for you guys, but that 1-page one, I think you'd be able to tackle quite easily. There's topic ideas for next year, the online resources. So here is the contest rulebook. So you can find it on NHD's site as well, the national site, I should say, and then the counting words on exhibits in websites. So let's download that and look at it really quick. So it shows the title counts once, and this is a specific to website, but you can see we explain really easily here, image credit versus caption. So even visually identified in 2 different ways, as I've been pushing on to you guys. But so even like media, you might not think of that for an exhibit, but make sure you reference everything that's on your exhibit in your annotated bibliography or anything else. All right, so now that I showed you guys that, I'm going to answer a couple questions, and then I hope you guys have all a great time at State. We'll be doing one more webinar before State, and that will be answering any questions about getting there and going over things you can expect when you get to State. All right, thanks.